Welcome to Fitter Radio, hosted by triathlon coach Bevan McKinnon and nutritionist Mickey Williden.
I have no idea what fast packing is.
Yeah, you don't. I was surprised by that, which tells me you don't listen that well to what I talk about, because Hubster and I, we went fast packing in June, where we
Did you call it fast packing in June? Fast packing at the time, or did you just say that you were going
down the mountain?
Yeah, National Park. You were going to run in, run out. I didn't think you'd actually coined a phrase or given it a name.
Well, I can't take credit for it. Imagine if you could. But no, this is a well-known phenomenon in sort of the trail running / hiking scene. It is a happy marriage between the two, actually. So you don on.
As most listeners go, nah, you've lost me, Mickey.
Okay, so you've got bags, right, OVs, and you try to have them as lightweight as possible, but you need to pack in your sleeping bag, food, other stuff, and so your bag ends up being about 6 to 8 maybe kilos.
Okay,
and
so
then
is that in terms of all the unwritten rules of fast packing, or is that a written rule that it's not allowed to exceed 8 kgs, or it becomes tramping?
No, that's a great question. No, it's kind of like, you know how it's an unwritten rule that you don't want to spend too much time in transition, but no one gives you a time limit on it. It's probably the same sort of thing sort of applies.
Well, you'd be doing nothing fast if something starts to weigh more than 8 kgs.
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay.
It will just be packing. You're right, hiking.
Yeah.
And don't you think tramping's a funny word? The more that I've been watching YouTube, watching people doing fast packing, hiking, sort of in that realm, the more I look at tramping, and I just, the word tramping, and it sort of feels a bit 80s, sort of backcountry. I don't know, tramping. What other country calls it tramping?
Very good point. They'd call it hiking, wouldn't they? So do we only call it?
So.
I don't know. Here's a question then, to go slightly off tangent. What about snowshoeing? You'd give that a crack, wouldn't you?
I already have. I loved it. It's because that time that we went down to Queenstown, that one time when we used to travel, and actually this year in Queenstown, we both wanted a different experience. So we thought, let's give snow.
You did.
Yeah, cross-country skiing. But, I mean...
Oh, no, hold on. Snowshoeing or cross-country skiing, which was it?
Okay, so the thing is, we went up... Our intention was to do cross-country skiing.
Yep.
And actually, this is linked to that fast packing conversation, because we met people in the hut that night that told us all about their experience, that got us excited for cross-country skiing, which was the thing that got us to book. And then literally like 15 minutes into the lesson, I'm like, no way, this is not for me. And I'm like, what about snowshoeing? And so I got a pair of snowshoes. Mate.
Wow.
And then I just clumped my way around the top. It was awesome.
Yeah, but I mean, I think it would be awesome. Because it's still a pretty tough workout. So that ticks one box, but it really does allow you to go exploring in the middle of what could be a real dump of snow and still get around no problems at all.
A real dump.
Yeah.
I'm glad you clarified of snow.
I wasn't talking about Dunedin.
What the? Oh, is that where this is headed?
So fast packing. So fast packing.
Yeah. So fast packing. And it's awesome. And it just allows, like, if you pack enough, like you can do like 3 or 4 days in a row, and you just have to be super smart about how you pack. Okay. And obviously, the longer you go, the lighter your pack gets. Possibly the faster you'll run, but of course fatigue would set in.
Yep.
Look, it's just a faster way to experience a great walk.
Yep.
And get all of the things that you love in it.
Okay. So, and you've been filling your lockdown time with YouTube videos of fast packing.
Yes, and actually, Baz said to me I had to stop posting about this one guy, Jeff Pelletier. So everyone Google him, or YouTube if you're interested. Yeah. He's just got some awesome videos. He's Canadian, slightly French Canadian, I think, and he's done a range of different trail ultra runs, but also fast packs. Yeah. And anyway, I keep posting about him, and Baz is like, Mickey, he's gonna think you're stalking him. And I'm like, but I am. But it's a great way when we can't do it ourselves to enjoy the great outdoors and dream of where we're going to be headed in late 2022, early 2023, whenever it is.
Beautiful. I love it. I think it's being able to get out there and enjoy nature and, just immerse yourself in that experience and to do it that way by using your own, energy to get across long distances. You've been doing that forever. You're just like giving it a slightly different name.
Exactly.
So no more van life.
Well,
van life to the fast pack.
That's exactly right. And then you come back and you regroup in the van, and then you park your van up at the start of another trailhead. And then it's
and then you could snowshoe. And then look.
But Bevan, we were just actually chatting about that whole immersion in nature and stuff. Have you been running in Noosa Park?
I have, yes, I have. My peroneal tendon is playing ball and I'm able to get into the park, although we've had a distinct upwards tick in temperature here in the last couple of weeks, and unfortunately with that we've got a few more rain showers, and you add that to 28 to 30 degrees and the humidity factors through the roof. So I'm sure I've mentioned this on the show before, but as someone who is prone to the little bit of sweat, I have been in the national park, but under tree coverage, you're covering yourself from obviously that direct sunlight. However, the humidity factor is through the roof at the moment. So it's been an interesting experience.
Do you remember in Kona a couple of years ago and you laughed at my hair?
Oh.
And I looked like a troll because the humidity was so bad. All my hair was like...
You wouldn't like it here at the moment.
No.
Honestly, it's definitely it's been quite a profound change. It's been like really... We've never been in Noosa long enough for us to experience the summer or spring summer. But man, it shifts quite quickly, and that extra 2, 3, 4 degrees, maybe even 5 degrees. That's a lot, but you get the humidity with it as well. So we've running will be the shortest duration workout that we do. But we did have some awesome. We've been doing some extra long rides at the moment, and getting out into the hinterland and so forth. And we're in a pretty special place to train, and we're enjoying getting into the wilderness a little bit more on the bikes and so forth. So it's been fun.
Oh yeah, sounds fun.
Anyway, any other news to report? You're just muddling along at this stage.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it. Got a delivery today. Yeah, from Beer Jerk.
Wow.
Yeah, so because I'm usually the one responsible for buying the beer in our house, just because it's just the way it rolls. It's how, I've probably got a bit more time to do it. And but obviously my inclination's to buy everything stout and heavy and sweet and creamy and all the rest of it. And so this time Barry took it upon himself to purchase a range of different IPAs.
Nice.
And from Parrot Dog and from Citizen Works and from... What else? There's Beer Brothers. There's No Garage Project. I think there's Deep Creek Brewing Company, a whole range of them. So I had the delightful opportunity to put them all in the fridge, not drink them all tonight, but get a good selection so we can choose from them tonight, because it's Thursday, and Thursday's like the first of our alcohol days in the week.
Brilliant. Thirsty Thursday, obviously.
Yeah, obviously.
I will give a shout out then to Heaps Normal, which is, that's the name of it, HEAPS, so Heaps Normal, and it's called their Quiet XPA, which is definitely a craft beer flavour, so XPA, and it is their zero alcohol beer. So Quiet XPA instead of a loud one. And we tasted that the other day and had one or two last night out at dinner. And I've got to really say that is one of the zero alcohol beers here in Australia. It's got to be one of the best. It's got so much flavour. And if you're looking for your zero alcohol option but still have that craft beer flavour to it, I'm going to say Heaps Normal. So that's our...
Oh, that's awesome.
That's our beer update.
Yeah. Well, if it's all right, if I just add a little,
another one.
End on the note of we got sent in one of my garage project orders a couple of beers called Tiny.
Okay.
And that's Garage Project's 0%.
Wow.
IPA. Yeah.
Oh, and not tasted yet?
No, tasted. This is a couple of weeks ago. And it was on point. It was really good.
Oh.
It was sort of, it was just refreshing and it really tasted like it just
enough
tasted
flavour
good.
in it. That's the key.
Yeah, it is. So I reckon that we'll have more of these coming out this summer and I'm really looking forward to it. And, not that how I'm like, it's our first alcohol-free, the day that we start drinking alcohol during the week, that we don't drink a lot. And it would be no problem if we decided, let's have a drink on a Monday. But I actually find it's better to just say, blanket, I'm not going to have alcohol Monday through Wednesday.
Yep.
And then I can choose whether or not I want to on the other days, and usually I do. But it's still nice in quarantine, actually, or not quarantine, I'm sorry, in lockdown, to have that almost line in the sand to sort of differentiate the week a little bit.
Totally. Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more because it's very easy when there's a boredom factor of a lockdown in place to jump onto the alcohol. And the one thing why I mentioned the Quiet XBA for sure is quite literally I've noticed more than anything just one or two beers affects my sleep, and so I've been happy to go through what Australia has to offer in terms of the zero alcohol beers. And do you know what I find, and I will say this, which I find is quite disappointing here in Australia, is that they've got some awesome zero alcohol beers, awesome range, as good as New Zealand, no problems at all, but very few restaurants will carry it. They don't have, I would say less than 25% of the restaurants actually have a zero beer option. They'll have non-alcoholic drink options, but for a country that's got heaps of zero alcohol beer options, they're not actually prevalent in the restaurants as such. So when you do get a restaurant that's got an option, it's nice to have it there. I'm surprised they don't, and I don't quite know why. But then we are in Queensland, which is possibly one of the biggest alcohol beer consuming states in the world.
Yeah, it's interesting. We had a chat to our mate Greg, who was over in Scotland the year we got married in 2020, so that Christmas, and he hasn't been drinking for probably 4 years now, and he noted a real uptick in the availability of 0%ers because they'd changed the law for driving, like a zero tolerance for any alcohol.
Yeah, okay.
So maybe, and I as societies progress, you're going to get more of that. But maybe this just speaks to how backwards Queensland is.
Well, I don't know, or how forward thinking they are with just getting drunk.
Yeah, you're right. It's all perspective,
It's all perspective. Well, like I say, got to give them a tip of the hat, though, because there's plenty on offer in the supermarkets and in the off-licence beer wholesalers here. So it's not like you can't get your hands on it. So what we do is we solve that problem by just having a couple of 0%ers before we go out.
Nice.
Right.
That's good.
Now, that's our weekly beer review. We better get on with the show. So firstly, let's hear from our show sponsors.
Better and Mitre Q are passionate about helping you revitalise, re-energise and rejuvenate every cell in your body. We want you to know that anyone can benefit from the amazing long-term properties of Mitre Q and have confidence that you are doing the very best you can for your fitness and your health.
Remember, people, Training Peaks and Infinite Nutrition, we still have our discounts available to all our listeners. So for Training Peaks, the 20% off to upgrade from a free to premium account with the code FITTERRADIO2021. And for our Infinite Nutrition consumers, those who are currently using it and those who want to use it, 10% off the site using the site-wide code FITTER10. Okay, Mickey, myofascia, you've heard of it.
Yes, I have. It's that, isn't it? That so covering from the top of our eyebrows all the way to the bottom of our feet.
Totally.
Of covering all of our muscles, and then when we get dehydrated, it gets really crispy and tight and stuff.
Perfect. Well.
Oh, there you go. Do you even need the interview?
Exactly. Well, in essence, we wouldn't be able to stand upright if we didn't have myofascia. We think it's because of the ligaments, tendons, the muscles and bones, but myofascia is actually a thin layer which actually covers and wraps around the muscle, and you can imagine myofascia like, let's say, a wetsuit covering and protecting your whole body. It covers from the superficial down into the deep layers of the body. So it's also really considered like the second body framework as such. And it's only been probably researched closely in the last maybe 10 to 15 years so that we get a better understanding of its importance. And one of our coffee club members actually alerted me to a guy, John Polly, who is an expert in myofascia, and he's a myofascial movement expert. She'd been to a couple of courses that John had actually presented on, and he's one of the educators of the year within the New Zealand fitness industry, I think the Australasian fitness industry actually. And I started to look into it a little bit just from, thinking about athletes, and it ended up reaching out to John, and we conducted a hot property interview to find out a little bit more about myofascia, its role in both health and also performance. And it was actually a really, really interesting discussion, and it may be something that people are seeing some issues in their own health and performance, that they may start to address it from a myofascial perspective. So in our hot property interview, we're going to explain a bit more than what you and I can do about the myofascia, and we talked to John Polly, and that's coming up in the show. And we also have a discussion from One Step Ahead and also our workout of the week, where you and I are going to revert back to the benefit of sleep and also potentially the benefits of taking naps. And then to finish off the podcast this week, we're going to catch up with Tim Brazier in our coaches chat, because we want to talk about the announcement of Utah or St. George having a world champs next year. We're going to catch up on the Super League. We're going to catch up on Xterra and a few other different talking points at the end of the podcast. So to start with, we mentioned myofascia, so let's talk with John Polly. I'm very happy to be able to welcome to the show John Polly, but I'm actually going to give a big shout out first and foremost to Rebecca Spears, who is involved in some of your courses at the moment, but also is one of our avid podcast listeners. And whenever a podcast listener suggests someone to chat to as an interview, it saves me a job. So in one breath, my podcasting has become easier, but then we're also talking to an expert in the field of myofascial connective tissues. So welcome to the show, John.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure to talk about what I love to talk about.
Okay, mate. So I want to take you back a little bit, and we're not going to talk myofascia to start with, but I want to know about your journey into health and performance, because it was a big career change for you a few years back.
Yeah, it really was. So, I mean, I've been an avid runner from around about the age of sort of 19, 20, through to when I started running into lots of injuries.
As every runner does.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and that was like not the niggles along the way, the type of thing that stops you for 3 or 4 years. That was the sort of thing. But by the time I literally ran into that, that was before I'd even kind of trained in the industry. So I went from being a company director of my own furniture company in the UK, and I took a completely different path. I lost my mum. I had a massive life change. I moved country. All this kind of stuff happened all within just a very short period of time. And I just kind of sat there and decided, what really do I want? What really do I want to do? And I'm working with people in that kind of fitness, exercise, movement realm just really appealed to me. So I retrained as a personal trainer and sports massage therapist. And that was and I did a bit of travel. I ended up in Australia. And now I'm a citizen of Australia, and I've been here since 2009. Got my wife and kids here, and I've built basically an education platform after spending years as a practitioner in the industry, helping people go from some people are very, very damaged, very broken, and other people are looking for that top 2%. So professional athletes at the top end and completely broken people at the other end. Ironically, sometimes they're the same people.
Well, yeah, true. The injury that could be holding them back is the same one. Now, myofascia. Yeah. When did the real big focus on that start to come for you?
So for me, it was shortly after I got here. It was from 2010. So I did some mentorships with some amazing people in different, from different parts of the world. One guy over here in Queensland, another one from America, and they're the world leaders in this whole idea of movement from a more holistic standpoint. And holistic has a bit of an overtone to it about being airy-fairy, but what we mean by that is that how everything is connected. Yeah. So myofascia, just in itself, like people might not realize that myo is muscle and fascia is connective tissue. So that that's the myofascial system is what we're talking about. But what I was lucky enough to do was to be mentored by the people who were the foremost characters in the world at the time. Yeah. Both in terms of movement, practice, science, that kind of thing, and also people that were doing stuff with an understanding of Thomas Meyer's dissections in a movement sphere, and they'd never been really done before because everyone was looking at it from a manual therapy sphere.
Yeah. And also the research into myofascia is not, it hasn't been extensively researched for a whole host of years. We're sort of talking... 2007, I saw there was one of the first position statements that came out, but really, even in the later 2000s, like 2018, 2019, there were really some really big research papers put out there to actually look at the role of myofascia and how it's essential, not just to helping us stand upright and not be a big blob on the floor, so connecting muscles and connective tissues together to help us, stand upright, but in terms of our bodily function, it's like a web, isn't it, really? And it connects and helps support our immune system, blood vessels, organs, every part of the body is actually supported by myofascia.
Absolutely. You've summed it up really beautifully there. So it's called, some people call it the extracellular matrix. In other words, it's everything in your body that is not a cell. Yeah. And that's why people traditionally, if you cut a piece of meat, you see that kind of white stuff going through the meat as well as surrounding the meat. Yep. That's fascia, that's connective tissue. Well, here's what you got to realize is that fascia, if you look at muscles, for example, every muscle fiber is covered in fascia. It has a layer of connective tissue over it. Yep. Every fascicle, i.e. group of muscle fibers, has connective tissue around it, has fascia around it. Every muscle, which is a group of fascicles, has connective tissue around it. Connective tissue then connects it to the bone. Yep. Bone itself, ironically, is just more mineralized version of fascial tissue. And then you've got this, skin is fascia. So you've got it covering everything. So it covers every muscle, every organ, every bone, every blood vessel. You've got to, you look at that and you go, okay, then not only does it cover everything, it also holds everything in place. So everything is connected to everything, which is one of my big guiding principles. So you've got every internal organ is housed in what they call the deep or core line of connective tissue. So from your toes to your tongue and temples is a chain of tissue, or one big elastic band, within which is housed every internal organ, for example. The superficial backline, another elastic band, which has been dissected by a guy called Thomas Myers in his book Anatomy Trains. You look at that and you go, okay, then the plantar fascia extends over the heel bone, becomes the Achilles tendon, becomes the calf complex, becomes the hamstring, becomes the sacrotuberous ligament, becomes the erectors, becomes the splenius capitis, becomes the scalp fascia, and joins to the eyebrows. Your eyebrows are joined to your toes in one continuous chain of tissue.
And for a long time, we've been really, really just focused on the muscle. If we talk about from a sports perspective, from an injury perspective, from a performance perspective, we've been thinking about, what's wrong with the muscle. Let's talk injuries first and foremost. We've got a problem with the muscle. We know where that problem or the pain is stemmed from. We're trying to find a solution for it. But for a long period of time, sometimes injuries haven't been solved because we haven't looked at it from a myofascial perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So people that come to see me, they are interested. They've normally been to everyone else. Yeah. And the reason that they're coming to me is that they've been told about this guy that works a bit differently, that looks beyond where they have pain. So let's take let's take a couple of examples, shall we?
Yep.
Let's take shoulders as an example, right? So we have people come along and they're like, okay, then I've been to a physio and I've been to I had a consult with a surgeon. I've been for loads of massages. I've been for chiro. I've been for acupuncture, and it just isn't kind of improving. Now, I'm not saying that all of those disciplines don't work, because they obviously do, because they exist and they have results. So those people that have been through all that and haven't got a result, well, they don't have what I would just consider a shoulder problem. Right. So what we know is that they have a shoulder symptom. Yep. The shoulder is a symptom and it's showing pain as a symptom. So let's go from there. All right, then what is the shoulder connected to? Well, it's connected to simply everything else. Okay, then can we look at these chains of tissue, these myofascial lines, or what Thomas Myers would call anatomy trains, and go, well, what links directly to the shoulder? So I'll give you a couple of examples. Swimmer, right shoulder, go down to left ankle. Okay, continuous problems with right shoulder, stiff, restricted left ankle. Okay, so complete repetitive recovery of shoulder, but no one's ever looked at the left ankle. You free up the left ankle, and that chain of tissue between left ankle and right shoulder suddenly works properly. So the shoulder isn't overstretching as a result of the lack of mobility in the left ankle. Then you take something like a fighter. Oh, shoulder pain. Every time I throw my right, I've got pain in my shoulder. Oh, look, your opposite glute, yep, it's really not working that well. It's actually tightened up quite a lot. And why is it tightened? Oh, it's tightened up because it's quite weak. All right, okay then. And there's this chain of connective tissue that joins that glute across to the bicipital groove, the opposite arm. Okay, so if that's locking down and pulling, if you imagine an elastic band on that left glute, say, going across to the right shoulder, and then you then tie 3 knots at the glute, suddenly you've got far less elasticity when it comes to the shoulder. So every time you throw a punch, it overstretches and starts to pull apart. Yeah. So you've got this shoulder injury that's not a shoulder injury. It's actually a weak glute, for example. You've got a shoulder injury, it's actually a stiff ankle. Yeah. And that's why they come to me, because I've got a system of appraising the body and going, okay, then here's where the limitations are. Here's the most likely. Let's see if we free that up, or let's see if we strengthen this area here, what effect that has. And ironically, the body actually tells you almost immediately. So if I'm with someone for a couple of hours, I will know within that 2 hours whether that thing is going to work for that particular injury, because the body will start feeling better almost immediately. The moment you take that tension off the system, yep, it immediately lets you know. And some people have walked in with a 9 out of 10 pain and walked out with a 1 out of 10 pain, 2 hours later, that stayed that way purely because we've finally gone to the body. Hey, thanks for telling us what's going on. We've now given you what you were asking us to give you for the last 6 months. Yep. Here you are. And we can then reinforce that, obviously, with a movement protocol after that. So we actually get to keep, I call it, you get to take it home with you. You get to take the improvements home with you.
Well, that's quite interesting that you should touch on that, because it appears from what the science is telling us is that the myofascia is very intuitive in its own right. So, it can be taught to behave in a particular fashion. So, like you mentioned, it can be taught to release or improve or to move better to allow other areas of the body to improve. But then equally so, if you persist with it in an injured site and train it bad biomechanics, it can continue down that pathway.
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's something called Davis's law. People may have heard of Wolff's law for bone. It basically responds to force. Yeah. So responding to a force profile, Davis's law is literally tissue lays down along the lines of force. Yep. Now, if you are laying down a force profile through your body that is poor, well, your tissues are going to go, it's okay, we've got this. We're going to build up extra tissue in that plane of motion. And it may not be what you need. So maybe gradually taking you towards a problem. But similarly, you can obviously, if tissue lays down along the line of force, well, actually, you can lay down new force profiles within a human body, therefore taking you away from that as well. Yeah. But the one thing that I would say is we can get instant change when we work with the fascial system. But if you want to keep that as a permanent change, i.e. for the tissue to remodel along those lines, it's 6 to 24 months for that tissue to lay down. In a muscle, you can get change in 2 or 3 weeks because it's pink, it's full of blood. So that you've got a massive blood supply, huge ability to change. Whereas, connective tissue is white. There's very little change in terms of the blood system. So it's actually a force profile that you need to do that to stimulate what they call fibroblasts, which are the same as osteoblasts in bone. Fibroblasts actually get stimulated to say, oh, you need to start producing more tissue. But here's the thing. When we do repetitive actions, those fibroblasts are just dormant because you're not putting multi-directional force into some of them. You're putting the same force over and over again, and that tissue wears down.
Yeah. Now, you mentioned and touched on something there that is fairly important, is when you talked about a 3D complex, which is the myofascia within the body. We operate in a very linear sport here in triathlon. Most of our movements are generally asked to go in that one direction. Now, I'm going to ask you, is that good or bad for the myofascia?
Okay, so if you want healthy overall tissue in a human body, not so much. No. So when you have repetitive sagittal plane, i.e. forward, backwards, up, down actions, then what it will do is the tissue will lay down along those lines of force and you will get very efficient in that line. However, is it maximum efficiency and maximum health? Well, no, it's not. Can you be more efficient if you actually put multidirectional forces, i.e. other planes of motion through those tissues? Yes, in a supportive role. So I know, for example, frontal plane, i.e. side-side movement, and the lateral lines of the body. So we have a chain of tissue that, if you imagine the base of the first, fifth, and fifth metatarsal under the foot, going out to the perineals, through the perineals into the IT band into TFL, and then internal and external obliques up to the side of your head by the ear there. That's one continuous chain of tissue they call the lateral line. Okay, so that's connective tissue and muscle joined together. So I think all in elastic bands. So the way you load that is actually by shifting my hips left and right. If you drive from the hip, you're actually loading that, but you're loading that long. In order for that to be more efficient, if you can make that more efficient, I should say, then what you get is better propulsion forwards. Why? Well, because that frontal plane action, that little hip action, if you're efficient in that, you can load that piece of elastic and use elastic forces to propel you forward because of the internal external obliques are a crisscross pattern. In other words, they help with rotation. So then you've got this rotational force that's enhanced by this frontal plane action. If you're more efficient in that action, in those lateral lines, you're going to propel yourself forward more efficiently. And that's the cool thing about looking at this, is that you go, okay, then we can give you a movement that's completely the opposite of what your movement is, understanding where the tissue runs. And by doing so, we are actually going to improve you going forwards.
Even though you're not training the movement forward.
Correct.
Okay. So in your practice, if you think about running and you talk about your history with running, and I'm sure you see a number of, I know that you've worked with triathletes, Australian junior triathletes in particular, but, we do work in that very, very fixed plane as triathletes. Is this something that you think could be quite an issue in a population like triathletes, myofascial issues that are causing injuries that you're seeing presented in your clinic?
Yeah, so I think from my point of view, the thing to look at, especially with running, like if people can just imagine an elastic band going from the inside of their left thigh through their groin, up through their abdominal and across to their opposite chest and into that shoulder there. That's called a functional line. Okay, so if you think that running is on a hard surface, running is almost all elastic recoil. But people think muscularly when it comes to running. So let's just take this chain of tissue. You've got one each side, okay? So as you can imagine, if you have your left foot forward, your right shoulder comes forward too. So you've got there a shortened piece of elastic. So then when you look at the opposite one, that's where it gets exciting. That left shoulder, so if my right shoulder and my left foot are forward, my left shoulder and right foot are back. Okay, so what we've just done is we've lengthened the piece of elastic between the left shoulder and the right thigh.
Yep.
What does a piece of elastic want to do when it gets stretched? It wants to ping, it wants to unload, it wants to recoil.
Yep.
So we get this beautiful piece of recoil that happens that carries that leg through. But that piece of recoil that carries that leg through instantly puts the opposite shoulder and opposite leg into that extended position, which then releases another elastic recoil. But what do we do when we train? We do, squats and lunges and deadlifts and all that kind of thing. We do this kind of muscular stuff, not this elastic stuff along those planes that really, really we want them to be efficient. So the irony is that when we train, we have a very muscular brain, okay, because the last 50 years of research has just been on muscles. So everyone was going, okay, then you need stronger muscles. Yeah, absolutely. But muscles generate and absorb force. They don't create motion in the way that we think that they do. If you, for example, take running as your example. So what we want to do is generate very efficient ways of traveling through a field of gravity, not up and down against a field of gravity. And all traditional muscular weight training is up and down against the field of gravity, i.e. not what you do as triathletes. Yep. You want to go efficiently through a field of gravity. Well, the way you do that, we are gifted as human beings with this amazing elastic system that is very efficient at taking us through a field of gravity. A very smart person once said to me, hey, look, his name's Michel Dalcourt. He's head of the Institute of Motion in the States. So he said, you know what? Let's say we took all the fascia out of your body, all the connective tissue, just gone.
Yep.
No elastic recoil whatsoever. And then you take something as simple as walking. How many steps do you think you would get walking muscularly only before you actually were in exhaustion, i.e. you couldn't continue? And I, obviously with it being him, I'm throwing my hands up in the air saying, I have no idea because, you're a god to me. Yeah. And he said 20 steps before you hit exhaustion. Our efficiency is almost completely fascial, not muscular. Muscles are very energy expensive. They require lots of blood. Therefore, they require lots of oxygen. Therefore, they require our heart to beat fast and our breath rate to be high. If we want to be super amazing runners, for example, we all want to train our elastic system. Now, another thing that Michelle said at the time was, hey, guess what? When it comes to endurance, anything above 30 minutes, there is a little thing called VO2 max that you guys may be very obsessed with, okay? So guys, guess what? After 30 minutes, guess what actually is an indicator of success?
Yep.
What is it? Is it VO2 max performance or is it movement efficiency? Oh, it's movement efficiency. After 30 minutes, it's movement efficiency. So VO2 max suddenly doesn't have a role to play. You can have lots of people at various VO2 max thresholds, and actually it's the efficient ones, i.e. myofascial efficiency, that actually trumps VO2 max performance. So that really hit home for me as a runner at the time. I'm going, ooh, okay. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, well, definitely. Well, okay, so we've talked about injury, and I'm sure that to isolate or to pinpoint where there may be a myofascial issue that's contributing to an injury is the realm of practitioners like yourself. And there's probably not a million people specialising in myofascial treatment around the world at the moment. I'm sure that's going to expand because, as I say, it's an emerging science that is getting a lot of people excited. But if we were at home at the moment and you just talked about training your myofascia or your fascia in general for improved performance, what does that actually look like?
So, first of all, it's involving your whole body because we are this whole complete system. So rather than isolating, we're looking to train whole body.
Okay.
So that's number one. Number two is elastic movements.
Okay.
So in other words, it's a load to unload. So you're looking to lengthen and shorten. Now, people might go, well, my traditional weight training does that.
Yep.
Okay. Let's add point number three then. And this is where it really gets kind of cool and interesting, in my opinion, because I'm a nerd about this stuff. But it's about putting the load on the highest amount of force at the longest length of the tissue. So if we were to take a bicep curl as our example, right? That's an isolated movement. Yep. You grab something, you bring it towards your hand towards your shoulder. Bicep, looks massive. We all feel better about ourselves. And then you take it away. Well, as you put the most force into the body, that tissue is shortening under tension.
Yeah.
So between my hand and my shoulder, it's shortening under tension, and it's the most amount of force because I'm going up against gravity. However, if I were to take that dumbbell, say, and drive it out to the side of my body and lengthen my arm,
yep.
And at full extension there, that's when the most force is going into my body. And actually, when I bring it back towards my shoulder, it's a hell of a lot easier. In other words, as I shorten the tissue, yep. The load, i.e. the force into my system, is decreasing.
Yep.
As I take it out from my body, it's increasing. So the most force is at the most length of the tissue.
Okay, yep.
Now, the beauty of that is that it fits with how life and sport tends to be. We actually, you will probably go through life, and 85% of your movements, the most force goes in when you are at the greatest length of that movement, the greatest length of tissue in that movement. So that's life and sport in general. That's us working as human beings on planet Earth with gravity and ground reaction force, and we're traveling through a field of gravity. That's how life is, okay? Whereas we do this other thing in gyms, which is not life and sport the majority of the time. There are some movements, don't get me wrong, that do. And by the way, this isn't a gym bashing session either. Do all the gym stuff. It's great. It's great for getting you muscularly strong. Absolutely do it. Please don't not do it. Absolutely do it.
Yeah.
However, there's more to that puzzle, okay? So what we need to do is, so coming back to your question, it's whole body, it's load to unload, it's elastic in its nature. Then the force profile is different. So you are using submaximal loads, and the most force, is going into your system at greatest length.
Yeah.
So if we take that, even just a simple movement like that hip shift, we drive our hip, say I want to load my lateral line. I drive my hip out to my right side and I take my right arm up over my head. I've just put length on that chain, but the most force going into that chain is when my hip is at the furthest out. When it comes back, it's unloading.
Yeah.
So it's actually the most force is at the most elastic length. So again, we're looking at things like that. And that sounds like it's really difficult. But there's a whole field called loaded movement training, which is basically strength training, and it's strength at length. Yep. It's not eccentric training, though. That's different. Because if I do a pull-up and people want to do negatives, so say they're doing a pull-up and they grab a bar and then they gradually let themselves down.
Yeah.
What's happened just before that? They've pulled themselves up. So in other words, the greatest force into their body has actually gone in the pull up, not the negative down. So it's a different, I call it length tension training as opposed to, muscular strength training.
And when you say submaximal loads, when people think about extending their physical being into long lines, we're not actually going to require a lot of load to actually make that quite stressful.
No, not at all. And I think this is where loaded movement training it's less sexy for some people because, if you can deadlift 100 kilos, but then I say, I want you to do what we call a dead shift. In other words, you actually take something and let's say I've got a load at my left foot and I bend down, I turn my hips that way, I reach, I grab that load, I pick it up and then I shift it across to outside my right foot. That's a dead shift. Okay, so I've shifted a load from a dead weight and I've shifted it across and down in a three-dimensional way. It's both transverse plane and frontal plane action. In other words, multi-directional. And I've moved that across. There's no way I can do 100 kilos through that plane of motion because I'm not conditioned for that. In the same way that if I do my bicep curl and I can curl a 20 kilo dumbbell, if I hold that dumbbell at length out to the side of, at shoulder height, well, I'm going to snap. So suddenly I have to do 5 or 6 kilos out there. So it gets a lot less sexy. In other words, a lot less fun for your ego
to
cope with.
From a hypertrophy perspective, because everyone lifting weights is looking for the aesthetic as such, not the function.
Exactly. Yeah.
And you take a weight the further away from the center of the axis, and it exponentially becomes that much greater to move that weight. You mentioned loaded movement training. Is that the description of a type of training that really does target, the myofascia?
Yeah, I mean that's really even that title was created to just help explain what, if you were looking to train with load, because a lot of myofascial training, you don't even need load to really challenge your body. But if you want to train with load, it would be loading movement as opposed to strength training traditionally up and down against gravity. So we're looking just at, and it can be any load. I mean, there have been tools invented just for loaded movement training, but you can do it with anything. And I've run courses on it, and I'd quite often do even free tutorials for people just to kind of connect with that stuff, and so that they can get, it's really not that different. But, for example, I've got 3 kids, another one due really soon. And I could, if I reach into the car and I pick up my baby, and as I pick them up, and then I get the baby, bring the baby close, and then I reach and put that baby somewhere else, or hand that baby to my wife, I've just done loaded movement training.
I was just going to say that. You've just done and also the reason that I wanted to touch on that is because, in the triathlon world, not everyone, there is a very deep understanding of the benefits of strength and conditioning and resistance training and so forth. But I think a lot of the time, sometimes, as you mentioned before, we have a particular belief as to what that is actually achieving in our training program. Yet we're also very aware of those athletes and the place for what we simply call core training or body weight training or whatever it is. Some people don't have enough time to go to the gym. They might be doing a little routine at home. But from what you've discussed today, it would be highly recommended that they look at it with a view of the fascia as well, because some of these quick routines that you could do at home could quite easily incorporate loaded movement.
Absolutely. And like you say, even if you don't do it with load, there are a heap of beautiful mobility actions that, again, load the body in the same way. So you're using body weight plus gravity as your load. So then if you're actually doing stuff that is length tension training or strength at length or, myofascial mobility, you do that kind of thing. What you're effectively doing, you're putting more space between the joints. So in terms of range of motion, which we all want to feel, because it does feel really good when we have range of motion, that if we can do that and we do that in a multi-directional way, then absolutely it can create a massive change in function, and you can do it literally anywhere and with any load as well. I can use a chair in a hotel room and I've got myself a load, right? Yeah. The thing that it touches upon and the thing that we haven't kind of talked about when I talk about strength at length, opening up the body, range of movement, is this whole concept of tensegrity. So this conflation of two words, tensional integrity, and that came around from an engineer in the 50s called Buckminster Fuller. So they looked at this tensegrity system, this idea that if you look at suspension bridges, is that some of the reason that they hold themselves up is because of those steel kind of wires. And so some of that tension is taken by that. If you look at a tensegrity system, none of the pieces of like the solid stuff actually touch. They're apart. And it's effectively the wires or the elastics that actually are creating this tension on that system. And what it's considered now and what's believed now amongst the whole myofascial world is that human beings are what they call biotensegrity systems. So in other words, our bones aren't the thing that kind of holds us up. It's actually this elastic system of tension that holds us up. So when we look at that, we need to have our joints and our bones apart. So Michel Delcourt would say our bones are swimming in constant tension, which I think is quite poetic. Yeah. So our bones are within this structure. You can create leverage, but they are not levers. Yeah. They're two different things. So you look at that and you've got this elastic system that basically is meant to hold our joints apart and push out against gravity, you look at that and you go, right, if we do a whole heap of movements that actually contract, i.e. shorten the tissues, our joints are getting closer together. That is increasing our chances of injury, and definitely it's reducing the amount of elasticity that we can produce, i.e. the amount of force that you can produce, the amount of length of a stride, for example, shortens. The elastic recoil that you then get is less. So you look less strong, but it's actually you're just less elastic.
Yeah. Well, it's really interesting because there's been a debate for years over the value of stretching. There's been a debate for years over the value of even foam rollers and so forth. You talked about what you can do from a practical standpoint in terms of training the system. But what are some of the other areas that you need to do just from a day-to-day basis to keep, your myofascial system in tip-top order? Because I know that it's move it or lose it. That's a given. But because they're sort of a wet and sort of sticky substance, hydration matters?
Big time. So you've got to think is if you imagine those elastic bands as tubes full of water, and that water is obviously it's mineralized in some way. It's got some salts, body salts in it, and things like that. I once heard another little poetic kind of phrase that I once heard from someone saying, the earth is 70% salt water. We are 70% salt water. There's a kind of a unity to us and being on this planet. But you look at that and you go, okay, then. So connective tissue is between 60 and 80% water. The Achilles tendon, which you'd think would be like a really dry kind of a thing, that's still 63% water. Yeah. I don't know how they work that out, but I know that figure, okay. Right?
Sounds good.
So you've got 63% water, and it goes through all these tubes of elastic tubes, yeah? So what we will need to do is get the water in there. Now, with our blood system, we have a heart. Our heart pumps blood around into our veins and our arteries, right? Well, what about all these tubes of water? What's the pump for that? Well, there isn't a pump that exists in our body other than movement. Movement is the pump. Yep. So if we're moving into those areas and we are taking on sufficient water, well, then that water is going to get into those areas. So what I normally like as the imagery for this is for those people that just don't drink enough and they've never really been presented with a good enough reason to drink more because they feel fine in inverted commas. Yep. Take a balloon, a water balloon, the shape of a sausage, and put another one on it, and you can slide those things. If they're full of water, they'd slide beautifully over and across each other, wouldn't they? Yep. Now you take 25% of the water out of one of them. That starts to sag over the other one, doesn't it? You take 50% of the water out, it sags even more. After a while, it's just stuck in place. And then the amount of time it spends sat there, then it starts to glue down. Yeah. So then one is gluing down to another. You then put that into what we call fluid dynamics of the layers of tissue that we have in our body, all of which should have little areas of fluid in between them. And that fluid can't get in there either because you're not moving into that area of your body and the hydration is not available. Well, then the fluid dynamics in those areas of tissue don't go too well either. You then get these adhesions, these fibrotic adhesions that happen, right? And people think that it's all about kind of just rubbing that out with the elbow. If they're still not drinking enough and moving into that area of the body, they can't. It's like how can you actually change that? The only way you can change that is by drinking enough and moving into those areas. And what I tend to say to people is you take the traditional desk jockey at the moment, if they sat at their desk for 8 hours of the day and they drink 2 liters of water at the desk, congrats. However, your organs are happy, but if you haven't moved, it's not going to go into those areas where you're all glued down and you want to increase your performance.
Okay. What about stretching your fascia? Is that different to stretching your muscles?
Yeah. I mean, we've got to be careful on the words we're using as well. So I'm not, if you stretch a piece of elastic and you hold that stretch, so you look at static stretching, you stretch a piece of elastic and you hold it that way. Well, I know, just in my underwear that eventually that's going to fail me. Okay. So you keep a piece of elastic on stretch. When it wants to unload, it wants to recoil, but you just hold it on stretch, it loses elasticity. Okay. So if you are static stretching pre-exercise, pre-competition, what you've just done is lost some of the elasticity. It takes about an hour to come back. So you go above 4 seconds. then whereas if you move into that length stretch and move out and then move back in and then move out and move back in steadily at that kind of a pace, so you're moving in, you're literally a second at end range, and then you come back out, and then you go back in. That's all the tweak that you need to do with what we call a stretch program, so that it becomes mobility, so it becomes elasticity. Okay. That's what we're really talking about there. So huge fan of elasticity, of myofascial mobility. And then what you can do is if you check the lines where the tissue runs in the elastic bands, and you can move in and out of those planes, well, then again, a much bigger effect, because we know the tissue runs along these lines, and there's about 18 of them. If it runs along those lines and we can work along those lines, it's quite incredible the change that you can feel. So I can change, someone can say, do a kind of like a squat reach type movement. And I go, okay, then do this, now do this, now go back to that original movement. And they get about a foot lower straight away, because the tissues just want to be worked in that way. We're increasing the fluid dynamics in those tissues. We're increasing the overall mobility of those tissues and the elasticity of those tissues. And then we haven't even talked about nerve endings, the amount of nerve endings buried in fascia. You've got, for every 1 in muscle, there's 9 in the surrounding fascia. Any sense of movement that you've got, any sense of discomfort that you've got, it's very unlikely it's coming from your muscles.
Which is why I mentioned before about the trainability of fascia, in the sense that it almost has its own brain. Yes.
So what you've got to realize is it responds to force and movement. And it houses all these nerve endings that are both proprioceptors, i.e. where you are in time and space, but also mechanoreceptors and interoceptors. So you look at those, and it's like, okay, then what's going on in terms of force, in terms of fluid, in terms of shear, in terms of extensibility, tractioning, all of those kind of things. That's where all those nerve endings are buried. And imagine if that is all glued down, we're not going to get response from that anywhere near as well. And then you go, okay, then those same interoceptors that tell you about, heat, tell you about pain, tell you about thirst, all those things, they're all your feel nerve endings. They're buried in your fascia, but they're also going to every internal organ as well. If you are tuned out to all of those, well, I find the best athletes I've ever worked with are the ones that are incredibly aware, and they are interoceptively aware, mechanoreceptively aware, and proprioceptively aware. That means that they have to have healthy tissue for that to happen.
Yeah. If we can't get to see someone, a specialist like yourself, and we're doing a few different other of our at-home modalities that can improve this, where does something like yoga or massage or your foam roller sit on the spectrum of myofascial health?
The classic answer is it depends, doesn't it?
Yeah.
So if you are doing manual therapy that involves what I would call pin and move type work, so you find these areas of limitation, but you are actually moving the body during that. So you've pinned that tissue and you are moving, both with a foam roller or with a practitioner. That fascia really likes that stuff. It really likes movement. Like it's the whole point of it. Its existence is for movement, like for elastic movement through a field of gravity, as I've said. So if we can actually create movement protocols through our hands-on, our manual or our foam roller, our kind of myofascial tools, then that's a really great thing to do. When it comes to yoga, if it's more yin, so in other words, length stretching, I'm not against yoga at all, by the way. But it's really good at the end of the day, because it's got this ability to help, that whole remodeling of tissue, but it's held at length. So in terms of elastic recall, it is lost, but it's fine at the end of the day, because the other thing that it obviously does is yoga is far more than a stretch routine. In fact, it's not really about the stretching. It's actually about this whole spiritual connection, going into a meditative state, going into flow, making sure that you are actually activating the parasympathetic nervous system, which is therefore putting you into a growth and recovery state. All of those things are fan-dabby-tastic, right? So you want those, but more at the end of the day. If you're doing it at the start of the day, one of the scariest things I ever saw was I used to do these kind of big training sessions on the beach. And I looked down the beach and I saw this young lady, and she was doing yoga and running, but she had them that way round. So I'd see them doing all these long hold stretches, and then they do beach sprints. And I'm like, wow, you've just got all this elastic that's all kind of floppy.
Yeah.
And then you're going to go, okay, then bang, 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 bang. It's just like you can't. It was so scary. And whereas swap those two around, it would be awesome.
Yeah.
But the nature of our industry is you don't walk down the beach and say, "Oh, you're doing it all wrong." No. Do you know what I mean? You just can't. You can't do that because it's so you're who are you to them kind of thing. But I see that, and I had to look away because for me it's incredibly nerve-wracking to see that because you're just waiting for. It's like watching a car crash that is going to happen at some point. It's like you're watching some kind of speedway or something. A crash is going to happen. It's just when is it and how bad is it going to be?
Well, they probably would have ended up on your doorstep at your practice the following week. Now, just to finish off, you just mentioned the mind-body connection, and there is a lot of evidence to suggest that these are intimately related in terms of our mood and how the myofascia actually responds.
It's so amazing. I've done some really cool kind of conference sessions with people, and you get a group of people in the room at a conference, and you go, okay, then here's what I want you to do. Can you just for me right now, just do a movement, a whole body movement. It might just be like a squat pattern or something like that. Just take a note of how that feels, and then you go, here's what we're going to do, and they need to go with you a little bit with that. But you're going to say, I want you now to imagine one of a really terrible time in your life when you were very unhappy, traumatized, unwell, whatever it might be. Now, close your eyes, adopt that posture, try and imagine how that was all feeling. And we do that for about 2 minutes. It's only 2 minutes. Do that squat pattern again. And then we go, okay, tell me how it's feeling. And they're like, I feel stiff. I mean, it actually starts to feel painful for some people. Yeah. They don't have range of motion. So, and about 80% of the room has this change, a negative change. Then we go, okay, then now I want you to think about when you were elated, something, you've won something, or you've just got married, or, your first kid's born, those are amazing elation, and adopt those movement patterns, adopt the postures that you were in at the time, feel that emotion. And then we do it again. We might say, okay, then do another 10 squats. And the change in people, it's just like, whoa, I feel so free in my body.
Yeah.
That is all this that's a mental and emotional change only. We haven't physically done anything to them. That's a mental and emotional change over. And their range of motion is massively changed. So we know that in the nature of society that we live in today, which is basically inhuman in a lot of ways, the life that we lead, we have a heap of stressors, which are both mental, emotional, and physical. As you can imagine, posturally, I've seen people come in and they're saying, oh, I know I've got to sort my posture out. What do I need to do? And it's like, it's not even a training thing. Yeah. What we need to do is actually look at your lifestyle. What's happening at home, what's happening at work, yeah. How do you feel about, yourself, all those kind of other things. Suddenly you're having this change. Now, there's a beautiful book called The Biology of Belief, which actually can show you at the cellular level. This guy's an award-winning cell biologist who's kind of come all this full spectrum across to this way of thinking. Bruce Lipton, his name is, The Biology of Belief. And it shows you the pathway by which you go, okay, then here's a thought. That creates a chemical change in your bloodstream. That chemical change in your bloodstream goes into these sensors that are attached to every cell. They're saying, okay, then what's going on out here? Oh God, it's a shitstorm out here. Okay, then that's then communicated to the cell. The cell will change its structure and function accordingly. It will either express or not express what it's meant to be doing, yep, based upon the chemical balance in the bloodstream. You imagine that over time, you've got a whole heap of cells in your body that aren't recovering, aren't healing, aren't rejuvenating. So that's just from a thought.
Yep.
So let alone stress across time, chronic stress across time, and whether that be a physical stressor, a mental stressor, or an emotional stressor, your body doesn't care. Your cells will change their structure and function and their expression based upon that stressor, and it's irrelevant where that stressor starts from. So if you have people not performing and yet their physical training seems fine, their physical body seems fine, you need to look beyond that because there's a whole heap of other stuff going on.
I could not agree more with you, especially on that last point, John. I think it's something that's completely undervalued in terms of the emotional state and the physical performance. And I think the two go so much hand in hand. And it's really interesting that I would love to have been at one of your seminars where you actually asked the athletes to go through, the participants to go through that squat movement, because that is, in its truest sense, an illustration of mind over matter.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And it's instant. That's the thing. It doesn't take long for your body to change. If you look at Amy Cuddy's work on power postures, what they've seen is that just by taking a saliva test across 2 minutes, they hold a posture, let's say a victory posture for 2 minutes, right?
Yep.
Arms above head, or Wonder Woman pose, where your fists are on your hips and you're just big and open chested and tall and powerful. 2 minutes like that, your testosterone goes up by 25%, your cortisol goes down by 15%. Okay, that's just by holding that posture for 2 minutes. There is a change in 2 minutes. So I know people who speak on the circuit, and I mean, I naturally go up when I speak on the circuit. I naturally, the passion and the energy comes. But what they do is they disappear into the bathrooms and they're doing power poses because they need to be more confident and they need their stress levels to go down. And therefore, posturally, that postural changes their chemical structure, which changes their mood, which changes their mental function, changes their creativity, changes their performance, their physical performance. You think of all those things that just feed through. It's quite incredible. So it happens quick.
Well, mate, thank you so much for chatting us through all of those topics today. It's been wonderful to get a deeper understanding of myofascia, but I can see that that's only one part of where we've gone today, which is really, really awesome. Thank you to Rebecca for making the suggestion to get in contact with you. But there's so many great take-home points from this conversation today that I'm sure a lot of our listeners are going to go away and revisit. Maybe it's an injury, maybe it's a performance issue, maybe it's just something that's going on emotionally within them that's actually holding them back in some way. So, again, thank you very, very much for your time today, and I can't wait to get this episode out to our listeners.
It's been an absolute pleasure, mate. And as you say, those people, they need to reach out. I've got a community of people that I've trained across Australia and New Zealand. And if they want to reach out and speak with me and book an appointment with me, all of this stuff can be done online as well. So that's the thing, is that don't think that just because we're separated by, globally, that doesn't mean you can't get help. There's a heap of help available.
Yeah, and we'll put all the contact links to your websites and contact details in our show notes so people who are interested can get in touch.
Sure. Beautiful. It's been a pleasure, mate.
Super interesting with that myofascial. So one of my good mates is a neuromuscular therapist. So he's got a phys ed degree. We did phys ed around the same time. He went on to study neuromuscular therapy, and so they spend a lot of time looking at the different tissues and what affects them and stuff like that. So he could very easily, how I said, crinkly skin or crinkly muscle, he could very easily tell when someone was dehydrated by how it felt. He said, that's myofascial. He's like, when he would massage, he'd be like, I can see you're super hydrated today. That's awesome. Yeah. Because it can make such a difference to how everything functions if it's not sort of optimally doing what it should be doing. Yeah,
and hydration is a big part of that for sure. That's mentioned, we covered that in the interview as well. And, when you understand how myofascial actually interacts or supports the entire framework of the body, then you actually realise the potential for working out how you might actually treat anything that you needed to that may have a myofascial aspect to it. And certainly in terms of mobility, injury prevention, potentiating movement as well, so increasing the capacity or potential for any form of movement. I mean, all those things are relevant there, and so it's certainly it's an emerging science, and it's an area that a lot of people are putting a lot more time and energy into understanding. And it was awesome that we got the referral to catch up with John and do that interview. And I'm sure that some people, I know that at the time we were talking about some courses that he was going to be running in New Zealand, and it was going to be in September, October, November time, but I'm pretty sure that's not, well, it'll be very difficult for that to happen. But as I say, we'll put links to John's details in the show notes, and if you're interested, you can get in touch with him to find out what he's doing in the future. And if he's got a workshop that's coming to your region, then get involved.
Awesome.
Have you had a nap today, Mickey?
Mate, I haven't, but you saw me yawn before. I could probably do with one, actually.
Okay, one step ahead, napping. Are you a regular napper, though?
Nah, not really.
Okay.
And actually, upon saying that, like I, generally speaking, and we've talked a lot about sleep over the years, but generally speaking over the last 18 months or so, my sleep has definitely improved.
Cool.
And for whatever reason that might be, who knows? Well, I mean, I've done a number of things I now do consistently rather than sort of ad hoc.
Yep.
And I think that probably contributes to that that overall sort of improvement. However, what I found interesting and what we're talking about on One Step Ahead today is, is there a possible benefit for people to nap even if they aren't in that kind of sleep-deprived state?
Yes, okay. And I've seen a couple of pieces of research to say that napping is at times can be because of the psychological as opposed to the physiological in terms of why people choose or incorporate it. We would suggest or be, our intuition would suggest that we'd think that most people nap literally because of sleep deprivation, or they're trying to catch up, or some other factors, work-life balance is causing them to be in a sleep deficit of some description. And we always think that there's a restorative component to wanting to catch up on an extra 15 or 30 minutes nap. But there is enough evidence out there to also suggest that there's people just do it literally for the psychological as opposed to the physical. And it doesn't necessarily or isn't necessarily always driven by fatigue. Some people just like to do it.
Yeah, totally right. And we've heard a heap that, sleep, like the idea of napping, which is something that if you work in a full-time sort of role, you can't, unless you're in a very kind of progressive workplace who sees this kind of thing as important and allows you to nap after work. I'm not sure if there are any workplaces like that, to be honest, but it's long sort of been reviewed in the productivity literature as being like something which could help enhance that kind of afternoon productivity.
Yeah.
And, it's been recommended as a countermeasure, as we've talked about, against sleep debt and an effective method for recovery, regardless of the sleep duration at night. And so what this particular review sort of looked at was, are there any commonalities or major themes that we can pull from studies done in the endurance space or studies done in the strength or anaerobic space or the cognitive impact? Are there any sort of take homes that we can look at? So, and there are a heap of studies. Well, I say a heap. For the particular area, there are quite a few studies, and they managed to sort of be able to group like 21 of them, and they had a number of sort of conclusions in those three different areas.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I have been, when I think back over my lifetime, I would have suggested that sleep or napping has been on and off. I think working from home changed things a lot. And I've always not had a problem. Like some people find napping quite slothful. And trying to get their head around that. However, I've always been of the opinion, if I find a cognitive decline, and it's been more because of a cognitive decline as opposed to feeling tired, like physically tired, I will sleep. And generally those naps, and sounds at times I'm surprised by this, could be before lunchtime, like between 10 and 11, or generally it's between 1 and 3. Are the two lulls, and quite frankly, they're always cognitive lulls, which still make you feel very, very tired as such, but it's not a deep physical fatigue. But I do find that any brief period spent asleep during 10 to 11 or 1 till 3 completely removes the cognitive fatigue that you're feeling.
Well, it's interesting because in their review, they looked at about 17 studies that looked at daytime napping on athletes' perception of fatigue and or recovery and their alertness and also their sort of rate of perceived exertion. And this is where it's I feel like this area can be quite individual. So most of those studies support that opinion that a midday nap, athletes may exhibit a lower perception of fatigue, lower tiredness, a better mood state, lower stress and anger, or even depression, right? And this is even in situations where you get enough sleep the night before.
Yeah, because that's, as I say, a lot of the research says it's not necessarily always driven by lack of quality or quantity of nighttime sleep.
No, and in fact, having that midday nap might even just be the reducing the buildup of the sleepiness during the day. So we've got these two systems in play with sleep, and it's this intermix between wake drive and keeping us awake and sleep pressure. And obviously at the beginning of the day, you've got high wake drive and you've got low sleep pressure because you're just coming out of sleep. So there's no real pressure, but that sleep pressure sort of builds up over the day to the point where you're so tired at night, you go to bed, and then the whole thing sort of, cycles around again. And what they think from that cognitive perspective and that increase in alertness that you're also talking about is that there's a period of time in the day where that you just get that buildup of sleep pressure that this almost sort of offsets that by sleeping for 15 to 30 minutes or 20 minutes helps just offload some of that sleep pressure, and you wake up and you feel more alert and more refreshed. And even if you don't have that sort of deeper slow wave sleep where the recovery actually occurs. It's interesting.
And I think that's it for me. Like, I would encourage anyone, like I try to get my athletes to sleep as such, and I look at it more as what you've just described. The research will back this up. In a very highly skill-based sport or highly reactive sport, sleep deprivation actually plays a big factor in, your reaction time and so forth. But even in an endurance-based sport where, it may be a low-intensity training session, the perception of effort goes up if there's cognitive fatigue as well. And I've always viewed napping as it just eliminates that cognitive fatigue. I go in there not necessarily to wake up feeling 1,000% more energized as such. I typically wake up a little bit groggy, and that goes straight away. But that deeper cognitive fatigue is just dissipated as a result of it. So sleep pressure drops.
Yeah, so interesting, eh? And then if you look at the performance metrics, so a couple of endurance examples, we've got a study by Blanchfield et al., and they demonstrated that athletes who had a 40-minute nap, they improved their time to exhaustion in a performance test that was completed at like 90% VO2 max when they had that 40-minute nap compared to people who had no nap. So that was really interesting. And then
that's a high-intensity effort.
Oh, heck yes.
Yeah, that's definitely right up there in terms of sustainable effort.
Yep, totes. And then there was another study, and this was in sleep-deprived and non-deprived athletes. And what they found was that there was an increase in the total distance covered during a 5-minute shuttle run test when they had a 30-minute nap compared to no nap situation. And that was in both sleep-deprived and non-sleep-deprived as well, which was super interesting.
Yeah. So in both those studies, we see an improved performance with the inclusion of a nap. And as I say, the physiological markers or psychological effect that it had, whichever it was enough for either extended performance or better performance to occur.
Yeah, and, a couple of the points that they pulled out that why sleep would make such a difference is that, well, in part, it definitely is that sleep pressure. And, you mentioned circadian rhythm when you were talking about your own sort of situation, and certainly that sort of post-lunch or post-prandial dip at about 2 o'clock where it's really easy to feel quite tired regardless of sort of what you eat. And that, in part, is just our natural circadian rhythm. So that will, a 15 to 30-minute nap can help sort of just get you alert, but even sort of beyond that 20 minutes, you get an increase in slow wave sleep too, actually. Yeah. So it might only be a fraction, like a 2-minute increase, and I think that the range was up to 11 minutes of slow wave sleep. Yeah. And this actually helped from a physical standpoint because it helped with energy conservation, metabolic recovery, restoration, higher parasympathetic nervous system activation, and higher growth hormone release. Yeah.
Yeah. There you go. There's another reason in the middle of the day from a hormonal perspective to get some HGH secretion as a result of a short nap. Is only going to enhance recovery for people as well. It's we've talked to many recovery experts over the lifetime of our show and so forth, and with all the different devices and everything that are out there at the moment, no one ever trumps sleep, and nothing ever trumps sleep. So as an aid to recovery, and you want a bit of growth hormone, if you only rely on your nighttime sleeps, you might be able to get a little bit more across the day.
Yeah, totally. And just a couple more points which I found sort of super interesting was the whole idea of a caffeine and sleep nap.
Yes.
So, there was a study that showed that following a night of partial sleep deprivation, so they had a total of 4.5 hours sleep, which is not a lot, combination of a 20-minute nap and ingesting caffeine at about 5 milligrams per kilogram body weight. So I think a couple of no-dose tablets would probably be the goer there. Prior to napping was more beneficial than having no caffeine because you mentioned kind of waking up groggy.
Yeah.
The caffeine helped alleviate a lot of that sleep inertia. So you woke up and you felt more alert. And the paper also sort of suggested that looking at the studies as a whole, you sort of want to You want no less than 30 minutes between waking up from a nap and going training.
Yep.
And potentially, that's with a short nap. And, for naps of longer duration, you do want to have at least a couple of hours before sort of getting out there and training just to help overcome some of that sleep inertia, though that caffeine might be a hack to that.
Yeah, and I've done that in the past, because the funny thing is I've gone for a coffee in the afternoon because I'm starting to feel a bit fatigued and think, I don't really never have coffee this late in the afternoon, but we're about to do some sort of work or workout or something like that. Have the coffee, still feel fatigued and think, if I can just lie down on the bed now, I'll still go to sleep, no problems at all because the caffeine hasn't fully taken effect. And then woken up as a result of it. I probably haven't said to myself, how alert do I feel in comparison to just napping alone? But if you can capture that window immediately after ingestion, by the time the coffee really starts to potentiate itself, you might be waking up, because I never set an alarm with a nap. Yeah. I know I will never sleep more than 15 minutes.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I can just go to sleep and rest assured that I'm not going to sleep for hours. On that first awakening, I'm up and that's it.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, that's good. So, it's quite nice to see this review sort of look at the area as a whole and sort of be able to pull a couple of things out, and might be helpful for anyone who might be in that work from home situation that might be able to get away with a bit of a nap right now.
Absolutely. Well, that's one step ahead. Now, the other thing that I'm going to ask you is, do you wish you would sleep more?
Again, if you'd asked me a number of months ago, I would have been like, give me a good technique to help with that. Okay. So right now I feel like I'm in a good space, but aren't you always after just little extra things if you need them to help with that sleep recovery? Absolutely.
Now, one of the reasons I asked that question of Mickey is because I find that a lot of athletes have difficulty shutting down, and I wanted to talk a little bit in Workout of the Week about some breathing protocols that you may use. And some of these have been pulled from some recent research that's looked at how we can improve or increase our HRV and our parasympathetic drive through the use of breathing protocols that can help the parasympathetic and vagus nerves stimulate themselves. And I also think that taking some time out, we've talked about mindfulness, we've talked about lots of different other strategies to help the brain calm itself for mental health and well-being, but also to help us try to sleep. But also just simply if that doesn't sort of excite you to jump into something like meditation or mindfulness, then simply looking at some breathing protocols may be the way to go. And if you're wanting to lie down on the bed and try to accelerate or quiet the mind as such, then giving yourself something to concentrate on and help you relax may be the decision maker between whether you can actually fall to sleep or not. What do you like at night?
So at night, it's actually awesome because I get to this point where we like go to bed, and I try and be in bed by, my goal would be to be in bed by 9:15, but it's usually sort of 9:30, which actually isn't that bad. And then I read my Kindle with my blue light blocking glasses, and those glasses, they immediately signal to my brain
time to relax,
time to go to, and so I'm reading, I cannot read another line. I just throw everything to the one side and then I'm gone. It's brilliant.
I think everyone has that, you know how to capture that particular moment when you're ready to sleep.
Yes. Interesting though, I would say that there are some nights you just know your brain is so active it's not going to happen.
Absolutely, and you know that before you even get in bed. You can watch Netflix,
totally
do everything else. Okay, so this could definitely help you, because while you can't consciously control your breathing when you're asleep, your actual daytime breathing pattern largely lays that groundwork for either functional or dysfunctional breathing at night. So if you can even fit in a few minutes of, say, focused, calm breathing before you actually go to bed each evening, you can set yourself up for a higher quality sleep. And you talked about some of those sleep cycles where we get better hormonal response across the course of the night and so forth. So I'm going to give you 3 proven protocols to try, along with a brief explanation of why they might be effective.
Awesome.
And I pulled this from a Training Peaks article that I saw, and also through HRV for Training, who are looking at a lot at breathing protocols that can actually help, as I say, the parasympathetic drive. So the first one, we'll call it the 1-3-2 protocol. So firstly, you inhale through your nose for 5 seconds. You hold for 15 seconds. Now, don't worry if you can't hold it for 15 seconds the first times that you may try this. You can build up to this slowly. And then you exhale for 10 seconds. So it's inhale for 5, hold for 15, exhale for 10. And you can spend between, say, 5 and 10 minutes on this protocol each evening, or any other time you're actually feeling stressed out. And this can actually help your body build up its CO2 tolerance and get you more comfortable with calm, almost sort of nonchalant nasal breathing that can keep you relaxed even when you're in your most sort of stressed state as such. So that's the 1-3-2 protocol. The next one is a little bit simpler, but the inhalation, exhalation is a little bit longer. So it's the 1-to-1 protocol. And this actually comes from the conclusion of a study that was published in the International Journal of Psychophysiology. And after reviewing the existing literature, the author noted that the best breath pattern to encourage high heart rate variability and a balanced autonomic nervous system is actually a 5-second inhale and a 5-second exhale. Now, that's actually fairly slow and controlled breathing. So it's also the easiest pattern to actually practice and get comfortable with so that we're not overthinking it as such. Now, this isn't to say that you have to stick to the rigid timed pattern. In fact, I know a lot of people actually find it a bit stressful to even count the number of seconds when they're inhaling and exhaling. So you can feel free to get creative with that 1-to-1 protocol. But the very act of breathing through your nose and focusing exclusively on it, particularly when life is hectic or your brain is actually racing, this will help you recenter yourself and find a sense of calm. So if you think of it now, it's an inhalation through the nose for 5 seconds and an exhalation through the nose for 5 seconds. And you can practice that again whenever you're feeling stressed or the moment you go to bed, and you can calm yourself down. It gives you something to just center yourself and to maybe just slow down that very, very active mind.
Nice. It's interesting when you talk about breathing and you sort of practice it, you immediately feel calmer.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, totally. And we've had a few breathing experts on the show. Casper Van Meulen, George Dallum, I think, was another expert in the field. And, you know, it is funny. We as humans have evolved a little bit, but maybe our breathing is evolved in a bad way, in a dysfunctional way. And we've talked about nasal breathing in the past. And I know that a stressed child, the first thing you say is, you know, let's take a deep, slow breath, and all of a sudden that stress leaves. In fact, I see you calming down as we speak, Mickey.
You can't help but calm down. It's so automatic to sort of like
Tighten
switch
up.
off your sympathetic nervous system. I love it.
So breathing technique 3, the 1-to-2 protocol. So even the 1-to-1 inhale to exhale ratio is best for improving HRV. There are other breathing patterns that can be beneficial in different ways, and there's an increasing amount of research to show that the efficacy of exhales lasting 7 seconds or longer can be of real benefit to us, and that's a fairly lengthy time to be exhaling breath. Now, based on the latest research, practicing breathing via these long exhalations even just for a 2-minute period appears to be a very easy way to hack the vagus nerve and to actually calm the nervous system. So one way to track the timing of your inhalation to exhalation breathing cycles per minute is just to use a 4-to-8 ratio of 4 seconds inhalation and 8 seconds exhalation. Now, again, for a lot of people, this may be a little bit too long to start with for them to actually not start to become stressed in trying to inhale and exhale over such an elongated period. So you can start with that kind of pattern, but you could actually, say, go to a 3-second inhale and a 6-second inhale and then progress to 4 to 8 and maybe even to something like 5 to 10 or even 6 to 12, because it does appear that you'll find a ratio that suits you best, and everyone here in terms of breathing is still quite individual, but that long exhalation followed by the equal time of the inhalation proves to be very effective in almost hacking the vagus nerve and the parasympathetic system. And there has been a lot of research in that space, and HRV has improved as a result of it. And if we can find our HRV, or it's positively affecting our HRV, then we know that the parasympathetic system is coming into its ascendancy, and therefore we're going to start to feel more relaxed and be able to get off to sleep a little bit better.
Yeah, nice.
So any one of those protocols could work for you, especially if you're trying to do that afternoon nap, because if your sleep quality in the night is fine, but you're still wanting to maybe increase performance potential by getting a nap in, but you're one of these people that says, I just can't switch off, then maybe concentrate on one of those breathing protocols, and you may find that it's a little bit easier to get some of that snooze time in the afternoon.
Awesome.
Workout of the week. Right, I have a catch-up with Coach Tim Brazier. We've got lots of things to talk about in the triathlon world, so we'll talk to Tim now. Coach Tim Brazier, how's your ligaments? How's your bones?
Oh, we're healing up. This is going to be a slow, frustrating process, I feel.
But isn't there a silver lining? Because you just told me that one of your mates had a way worse mountain bike crash and basically separated radius and ulnar and wrist and everything going with it. So you're almost happy.
I am in a way. He's put it in a good perspective. He's got kids the same age as me too. So, hello, mate, you're a way bigger dog box than I am.
And he's got a very computer-based job, hasn't he?
Very.
Yeah.
He's probably going to get very good at dictating. Yeah.
So how's things been going? We've just spent 20 minutes talking about all the racing that's happening, all the racing that's coming. You've been watching all the racing as well. Exciting times.
Oh, mate, it's been pretty cool, eh? Like, the amount of racing on and the quality of it too.
Yeah.
Has been awesome. And then I guess for us, it's exciting coming forward again because some of our athletes are getting involved more in races again.
Yep.
Coming up. So that perks up our interest. And then just some of the performances that people are putting out is next level.
Yeah.
I mean, we'll talk about it later, but Joe Skipper's done 5 sub-8 hour races of his last 7.
Yeah,
incredible.
Unbelievable sort of stuff. We had 70.3 Worlds performances that were just next level. The Super Leagues obviously caught our attention, and we've been talking a lot about that. There's still more racing to come as well. I think we've got another 70.3 that's going to be covered maybe next weekend in the US. We've got Ironman California, Ironman Florida left to go. I know that Florida is a female-only race in the US, so I would imagine that we'll get Ironman now covering that event as well. I think we've said it a few times in a year where we felt triathlon was severely interrupted because of COVID. I think that any single weekend, even this weekend that we're recording on, and we won't be able to cover the results. We've got so many challenge races still running in Europe at the moment, and we know Braden Curry and our own Kyle Smith is actually racing this weekend.
Yeah, Challenge Salau this weekend, just down the road really from where they've been based in Girona.
Yep.
Just outside Barcelona, which is going to be a flat, fast course. The fields are really strong as well for there. And the weekend after, there's a race up in Montenegro, challenge race. The weekend after that, there's a race in Kyle's going to go down to Mallorca.
Yep.
The same weekend as Ironman Mallorca.
Yeah.
The week after that is Ironman 70.3 Portugal. It's just ongoing.
It certainly is. Now, you've actually also had your athlete Kyle Smith currently training with Jan Frodeno in Girona and learning from the GOAT, filling in and getting a couple of weeks training on swim, bike and run with Jan.
Yeah, he's been pretty much full noise Jan on Jan's program for about 3 weeks now, which has been, eye-opening for Kyle. I think fantastic for a guy who's 25 and getting into the sport to be able to see what the GOAT does on a daily basis, what that looks like, and what if he wants to be that good or better, what he's got to aspire to actually deliver every day to achieve the result. And I tell you, it's been eye-opening. It's pretty impressive what he's able to do. And at 30, what's he now, 39?
Yeah, if not 40. Yeah. I'm not absolutely sure. Yeah. Don't quote me on that, but he's definitely, as we speculated before we started recording, how many more years left for Jan Frodeno at the tender age of late 30s, early 40s, whatever he is. But he's still pumping out really, really solid sessions. And I think, you're not privy to the inside, workings of the program itself as such, but you do see the sessions that are being completed by Kyle since he's there, and he still doesn't back off at all, Jan.
No, not at all. It's credit to Jan to let Kyle in, which has been fantastic. But, to see a guy that runs Ironman, predominantly Ironmans now, and they're doing sessions running faster than 250 per K, some of the reps. It's so impressive. And that's backing up after multiple key bike sessions through the week and other run sessions through the week. And, big 6K open water swims as well. 3 to 4K open water swims are pretty solid effort, but 6K, it's huge. No tumble turns, no stops, just going at it.
Wow.
That's big load, and Kyle's learning heaps, and we're going to take so many learnings from it, and hopefully we'll see them over the next couple of races too.
Yeah.
Which would be pretty cool.
Well, it's certainly a wonderful opportunity for Kyle, and it's one that not many people will ever get the chance to train with Jan or to see what he does on a daily basis. So it'll be interesting to catch up with Kyle, because I know also his name is on the start list for Challenge Daytona later in the year as well. So he's got a few more races yet to unfold before he attempts to get back to New Zealand like the rest of us.
Yeah, exactly. He's playing the lottery. But and again, I guess we're playing the lottery in a way, in a second sense, because he's trying to get his PTO rankings up.
Yeah.
And for triathletes now, that's a big lottery. That's big wins if you can get up higher and higher. And currently he's sitting in 21st, so he needs to leapfrog into the top 20. And come Clash with such a good field, can he leapfrog into the top 10?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a wonderful opportunity late in the year as well. Talking about winning the lottery, Super League is like winning the lottery for triathletes in terms of prize money, isn't it? It's like, wow, the Malibu race was, this is our first chance to chat about that event. It was I honestly believe that was my favourite month of watching triathlon in that Super League racing, and tip of the hat to the Super League. I did see a poll online that asked of all the events that are covered visually for triathlon, from your Collins Cup to your 70.3s to Kona to Super League and the like, which was the most favourite for the people that participated in this poll, and Super League was obviously right up there as a made-for-TV triathlon, but it came down to the wire, and the athletes that walked away with the biggest prize checks, including our own Kyle Smith, and I think
Hayden Wild.
Including our own Hayden Wild.
I would have liked to.
Yeah, totally. And even Taylor Reid, I think, got 10th overall in the series as well. But some big money, Georgia Taylor Brown, 140,000, Jess Learmonth like 136, Hayden maybe 104, Alex Yee took home 120 odd.
120 odd.
Yeah. Big money. I mean, money that will fund those athletes for a couple of years.
Yeah, and rolling down to like Matt Hauser, I think he walked away with 34K.
Yeah.
A young kid out of Australia, and that's going to help him for a couple of years, hands down.
Yeah. It's really interesting because you look at it and you ask yourself why. Where is that money coming from? How has Super League been able to put so much on the table, offering it to the athletes? And you can get it for many different reasons outside of just winning the races, from preems in the swim, bike, run, all that kind of stuff. Yet we're still talking about Ironman races where an athlete may be going for 9 hours plus or minus, and only walking away with 5,000 as a maximum prize purse, or even less sometimes. Whatever Super League are doing, they're doing an incredibly good job of it.
Yeah, agreed. And they've obviously, I think, short term had a really good focus on delivering for the athletes, like PTO as well, and that should, I think, in time start to pay back Super League, because I'm sure they'll pick up some really amazing TV coverage. They'll start to get better sponsorship.
Yep.
More money will start to come into the sport and roll around. And it really begs the question for me, why haven't these other organisations done this?
Yep.
Like the create amazing product. I mean, World Triathlon Series has been going now for 11 years. Prize money hasn't increased significantly in that area, really. And they've had all the athletes at them all the time, the best athletes in the world. How come they haven't developed this sort of product and coverage and enthusiasm and prize money and building this whole package? It's fascinating. So it shows maybe that the commercial motivation of Super League drives that versus maybe it's a world body. It's a little bit different, the motivations of what drives their series. Yeah.
Well, it really felt like and I don't mean this in a disparaging way, like a circus. It was like they were all performers. They were there, but their camaraderie was very obvious between the athletes. They tended to arrive early, train together in big groups. They were having a lot of fun. The team element seemed quite obvious, because I could see the women waiting for the men's races to finish and congratulating their team members and everything that went along with it, and vice versa. They were out cheering for each other in their other races. I felt that there seemed that condensed nature of it across a month just really seemed to work. I could have done with another couple of weeks.
Yep, definitely could have done with a couple of races. The athletes would have been smoked by the end of 6 weeks, but man, the extra racing would have been so cool to watch.
Yeah. Well, I would actually think punctuate it with a couple of lay weeks in the middle or something like that. But I think just the timing of it as such, that it did have the inclusion in the last race in Malibu of some what they call wild cards. So Gustav Eden came back in, Christian Blumenfeld came back in, Flora Duffy came in, Lucy Charles came in. And so there were some athletes that couldn't make the timing of that event as such. But maybe in the future they can. And in respect of their inclusion in that last race, as much as it led to, the only criticism I would have towards the Super League in general was, whilst it was nice to have those wild cards come back in at the last minute, because they're all very well-known athletes who could have influenced races, the fact that I believe they did influence races actually meant that those that had been there all season, and especially in Jess Learmonth and Georgia Taylor Brown's case, I think it just influenced the outcome there a little bit more than what it should have as to who was the overall series champion in that regard.
Yeah, there's a lot of discussion about that, right? I think Jess winning 3 races, but yet not the overall series champion.
Yeah.
Georgia Taylor second on 3 second in all. And you've got to argue that Jess put out the predominant performances across all the races, and Flora significantly influenced that last race, which is a real shame for Jess. Showed her amazing skills, though. I mean, it
unbelievable.
Just shows the next level that Flora, I think, is at over the other girls.
Yeah.
Especially when you put Lucy Charles in there. And it just shows on that type of racing how important skill sets are. And Flora's developed that skill set from her exterior days, the amount of time she's had in the sport, the commitment she's made to it, which it was really a masterclass of performance.
Yeah.
A very negative effect, obviously, on Jess. But we didn't see that as much in the guys, but Blumenfeld brought some interesting tactics to the table, which probably showed maybe as a maturity to the racing, or just, as we talked off air about, like his just love to race. He's sort of looking behind going, come on, guys, let's just have a showdown every time and go at it, see who's strongest at the end.
And you'd see all the experienced Super Leaguers were just running in a pack going, this is the first race, Christian. We've got 3 more of these to go.
Yeah. We'll see you in the last race.
Yeah, I'll see you in the last race. And look, it did come back to haunt him a little bit in the last race as well. But, I mean, Alex Yee was... What a year he's had. He's really, from the point that he mentioned, I saw in an interview saying that he didn't even know if he was going to get selected for the Tokyo Olympics, to finishing off Super League like this as well. He's one for the future. Or no, I wouldn't even say for the future. He's here now, and he's showing that in his swim, bike, run, he's very well-rounded, and he's not showing too many weaknesses that they can exploit. Johnny Brownlee's still up there, still, throwing punches left, right and centre, and still showing he can be as competitive even at these really micro sprint distances. And then the girls as well, or the women, they were just so... It was just so entertaining to watch that I certainly can't wait for it to roll around again next year.
Yeah, I agree. And I'm really interested next year, once all that post-Olympic hangover's gone, how some of those other athletes bounce back. And we saw Jacob Birtwhistle and Mola really struggling.
Yeah.
And miles off the pace, and it'd be awesome to see what they could bring to the table, which would make that, like seeing Jacob kick at the finish against Vilhacier and Vincent, Yee and Hayden, would just make the race even stronger.
Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Absolutely. Well, look, a great addition to the end of season triathlon viewing, and one that we had it in our diaries. We're getting up at 6:30 in the morning here, get a coffee, Super League. We were even joking, because it seemed that the strapline was "We are Super League," and me and Nick were saying to each other, "We are Super League."
Yeah,
we are. Now, there's been some other racing that's come and gone as well. Joe Skipper, as you mentioned before at the beginning of our chat, what a year he's had, and really, I think a lot of people gave him a lot of credit after this performance, including Lionel Sanders, who finished second in Chattanooga to him. Joe's been... I think actually Joe's Achilles heel was consistency a few years back. There was either mechanicals, or he'd have one good performance, a bit of an average performance. He might have something interrupted his race, or for whatever reason he was just off. But in terms of the bike run, he has proven to be just one of the best guys around in being able to either hang with the best cyclists in the world, or if not, break away from them. And he is so often, as we mentioned before, running in that low 240s. He didn't have to in Chattanooga to take the win, but he did have, he'd done it on the bike. And an 8-minute victory over Lionel Sanders with Ben Hoffman in third was just a great way to see Joe hopefully finish out the season. But I'm pretty sure he is on his break now.
I'm pretty sure he's on Clash Start this, I thought, too. So, Joe, mate. Yeah. I mean, credit to Lionel. I mean, that's Lionel's third sub-8 hour this year.
Yeah.
But for Joe, he pretty much rode Sam Long into the dust.
Yeah.
I mean, Sam didn't finish the race after the bike. And he's constantly riding sub 4:15.
Yeah.
Which is Starkowicz territory all the time.
Yeah.
And then, as you say, running the low 240s.
Yeah. And I don't know if people actually knew or not, but we watched the coverage, and I didn't see it reported widely in the press, but he lost his gears towards the back end of the ride with about maybe 15 odd Ks to go, maybe a little bit longer. So he's stuck in like big chain ring and the 11. And so he had to negotiate the entire rest of the ride. And this is when Sam Long was still in his company. And there were some rollers left on the bike course to get himself over. But he didn't mention it at the end or anything like that. He wasn't making any excuses. But it was definitely something that I thought at the time. I was like, oh, this could turn sour for Joe because, if someone gets a bit of time on him now, there's nothing he can do about it. But no, he just got on with his work. And once he was in T2 and then running again, as Lionel Sanders said, he was untouchable.
Yeah, completely. And, again, riding that, like a 55.11 or whatever he had on that day. It's going to sting your legs too. As Kyle experienced at Collins Cup.
Yep.
So to be able to get off and still run 2:44 is nearly more impressive.
Yeah. And a great win by Sky Monch as well. That was an awesome win. Melanie McQuaid in third at 48 or 49 years of age was pretty impressive as well. But it's interesting to watch the women's race and the women that are really at the top now, and I'll say the Kat Matthews of the world, the Sky Monches. These are people that came from age group racing. These are age groupers turned pros. They're really showing that even at 70.3 or full distance Ironman, when they're fit, they're in the contention to win, if not be on the podium. And it was really nice to see Sky get that victory there, because I'm sure this was what Kona Fitness was heading towards.
Oh, agreed. She smashed the record by 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Again, a run nearly sub 3 hours off a 4:44 bike. I think it was really impressive, and it was. I think we kept coming back to this every podcast. Like, these top females are just a notch above the rest of all the other ones. Like, she won by 26 minutes, I think, and that's not to discredit the other performances of the other girls. They're still 5 years ago, or 3 years ago, would have been good races, but there's been this lift in the top females, and they are significantly faster than the rest. And I think Kona could have been a really cool race this year with all those top girls at the start line. Reef, Sky, Jackie Herring, Lucy Charles, the works, Anne Haug.
Yep.
Would have been fascinating.
Yeah, well, and over the same weekend, I think in Ironman Austria, Laura Philipp, who had run so quickly in Finland, posted a 2:44 marathon to win Austria. So we're talking about some women that are really that, as you say, that top sort of 10 females. They're the benchmark at the moment, and there's a big gap performance-wise between those and the next tier as well. You mentioned Kona, however, and the big speculation has always been initially Kona was going to be a February race, but we now know that we have 2 World Championships next year, one in St. George and then one later, hopefully, back in Kona. We talked about taking the World Championship mantle or name away from Kona and still keeping Kona as a full Ironman, and we now have 2 events next year to look forward to, but then we also in that Kona race have the first ever time that they're separating men's and women's a field. So we're going to get 50 women on the start list as pros in Kona for the very first time. It's been something that is 50 years in the making.
It feels like it's one woman added at a time, doesn't it?
Yeah. So we've got that to look forward to, a 2-day event in Kona as well. And I'm sure that's been talked about around the coffee rides around the world of all triathletes over the last couple of weeks.
Yep. Completely. It would be fascinating what age group males they put with that female group as talked about on the second day and how they manage that. Because obviously if you put like your top age group males in contention there, they could influence that female race. So it's got to be quite strategic about how they do that. And I'd be really interested as well. The other thing that's popped up for me is how people qualify, because, you've got a world champs in May and a world champs in October. And then somewhere in those windows, you've got to slot another Ironman in if you haven't already qualified for Kona. So you've either got to do something early, Jan, Feb, or try slot something in the middle and hope you nail it to get your Kona slot. Unless you're Joe Skipper and you've nailed it already.
Well, you mentioned that, but we do have a number of full iron distance races to finish the end of the year, where I'm sure a lot of the athletes are really desperate to secure those a really early Kona slots for the October race. And what's going to be very, very interesting is both Ironman Cozumel and Ironman California, because Gustav Iden and Christian Blumenfeld will be at those two races. And in California's case, Gustav Iden will be racing Jan Frodeno. And that is going to be a fascinating watch.
Oh, that's going to be a tussle. It's going to be awesome. And whether Eden has the conditioning to be able to crack it over an Ironman will be fascinating.
Yep.
Because Jan's going to be coming in hot. We all know what he did at Tri-Battle.
Yeah.
When he smashed the world record on a very fast course, obviously. But he'll be coming in hot. And, Jan hasn't got that much longer left in his career, I imagine. So he'll want to put himself up against these good up-and-comers and prove a point that he's still got it and come and try take it off me at Kona next year.
Yeah. I would say that the change in the events and having two world champs next year could be all Jan Frodeno wanted, maybe potentially for a swan song. Go to St. George if that's, he normally races middle of the year, whether it was a Ironman Frankfurt or something similar, and then races at the end of the year. Why not go to the two world championship races, which is going to be hugely a jam-packed calendar of racing next year with those two events. But you could see that being, hypothesising here, could be what Jan Frodeno sees as the way to sign off at the end of his career. But then you've got these two hungry guys from Norway. So Blumenfeld wants to race in the heat of Cozumel because essentially he's obviously got his eyes on Kona next year. Casper Storms had a great 70.3 in France. I'm sure he's looking to try to get his Ironman slot somewhere as well. And the whole Norwegian group seems so dialed in that I actually don't see their novice iron distance resumes being something that necessarily will hold them back. They train so much that they're virtually training what full distance Ironman athletes do, if not more. So they're not unfamiliar. They don't race this distance, but they're not unfamiliar with going the distances and training. And look at how well they've been prepared for all their events. They seem to have such a smart team behind them that, I don't see them not being a threat in Kona in October next year if they all qualify.
I agree. And I think obviously it's been pretty strategic that they're potentially doing different races at the end of this year, both make sure they nail their spots for Kona so they don't have to worry about it next year, because no doubt they'll probably go back into ITU racing as well and be trying to race across both. So whether St. George Ironman becomes a factor for them in their calendar or not, I'm not sure it would be. But they'll be preparing specifically in those races for that Kona event, try and take as much learning as they can. And they could be some of those probably very first athletes, I'm trying to think back, who would turn up on debut in Kona and be on the podium.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. I think the sport's changing in a whole host of different ways, and the knowledge bank of the athletes that are still racing at ITU level or Super League, ITU, Olympic distance. I honestly believe that the knowledge gap between what's required to compete at the full distance has been the coaches know what they know and know what they need to do for the athlete that may not have done an Ironman but is attempting to race one. And the difference between doing your first full from an experiential perspective is that things are done a little bit more slowly. The real tactical side of it, transitions, all that kind of stuff just doesn't quite matter as much. It's about knowing your physiology, knowing your metabolism, and then going out there and executing. And they seem to be very dialed in to knowing exactly what they're capable of doing. Yeah, completely. And all that new technology like the Super Sapien stuff as well is really assisting with that and enabling them to dial in so cleanly on what they need to do and how they need to execute. And one person I'm interested to see actually turns up in Ironman next year will be Tamara Jewett, whether she dials into an Ironman. She at Augusta, 73-minute run, was on par with the fifth fastest male. And could she turn up an Ironman and with more time on the bike and run, come through and be a challenger in that probably top 8, top 5, potentially. Absolutely. Tamara Jewett, that's not a name that a lot of people will know about. She's actually a vegetarian. I'd seen that in a couple of interviews because there's not a lot of information on her. An ex-runner. But this is the second time that she's run under 75 minutes off the bike. I think she did a 74 not long ago. This is a 73. She only just didn't run down Ali Salthouse. So Ali Salthouse was able to turn around her less than optimal 70.3 world's performance and win in Augusta. But Tamara Jurett is certainly a name for people to watch, because I would love to be at any race to see this woman run.
Oh, that'd be awesome. I'd love to see her, Laura Phillip, and Haug.
Yeah.
They're all girls that are capable of around a 2:40 marathon now.
Yep.
Really go at it. And Lucy, I mean, we don't know what Lucy's really truly could be capable of now. She seems to have improved over and over again this year. And obviously working with Dan Lorang now a lot. And what she might be able to put down from the run side of things come Kona as well.
Yeah. Well, it was interesting to see. It was more publicly known that Lucy, or actually Dan Lorang reached out to Lucy Charles. And was very intrigued by the fact that she had publicly said that she was keen on trying for Paris as Olympic distance and also to continue on her long distance career. And he did wonder whether what would it take physiologically to be able to still retain that speed but be competitive over the full distance at the same time. So he asked if they were interested in working with him, and they jumped at the opportunity. And 70.3 worlds, if that's an indication of whether it's working or not. But then the other interesting conversation that a lot of people were speculating about was Lionel Sanders. And if you watch Lionel Sanders' YouTube channel, you would have known that he had recently referenced a coach, and he'd never actually put a face to a name as such, because he used to had returned to working with David Tilbury Davis in a more ad hoc relationship as opposed to, I think, the full control of the program being run by the coach. And then they went their separate ways amicably. But then there was a little bit of information trickled out into the media that it's actually Gustav Eden's brother, who is closely associated with the Norwegian program and is a coach within that program, I'm pretty sure, is now Lionel Sanders' coach. So that's going to be really interesting to see. I mean, look, this is Lionel Sanders, who's fully focused on the full distance, and he's turned, by all accounts, to Gustav Eden's brother, who has really had cut his teeth on Olympic distance racing.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see if Lionel ends up training with him a bit, and whether we see a shift in some of Lionel's abilities in the 70.3 side as well.
Yeah.
Because I imagine, they're going to bring that same approach across to Lionel. It'll shift his skill set as well.
Yep.
And they might feel that he needs to improve that top end to be able to bring that across to be in the hunt with sub 240 marathons now.
Yeah. Oh, well, look, as I say, there's been a bit of some coaching changes. The athletes seem to, I don't know if we really do have distinctly different full course or full distance athlete group and a short course group anymore.
Yep.
I honestly believe that the volume of training that these athletes are currently doing, we're back to what it used to be in the Mark Allen, Dave Scott days, where if it's a triathlon and if the swim's 300 and it's a 6K bike and a 1.5K run, I'll do it. But then equally so, if it's a 3.8K swim, 180K bike and a full marathon, then I'll do that as well. We're seeing a lot of blurred lines and blurred edges as to what people are defining themselves as.
Yeah, completely. And I think it's really exciting for the sport to see people be able to dive across and chop and change and challenge the norm, challenge the science. Sort of said, no, you'll lose your speed, for quite a while there. And now it's starting to turn around. Well, actually, no, we can put these things together. Yeah. This is what a program looks like. It's generally all these guys are training over 28 hours.
Yeah.
There's layers of speed work in there. There's layers of high power work in there that's crossing across into delivering in the long distance sphere as well. And as you aptly pointed out earlier, what they're trying to do is just adapt how their understanding of their metabolism, of pacing strategies, and can bring that fitness across and the skill sets across to long distance.
Yeah. Well, we regularly hear of the volumes that these ITU and Super League athletes are doing. Martin Van Riel was one. For example, I know what I've delivered to the pros I've always worked with, and most of the ITU athletes are doing more.
Yeah.
So I don't think it could be very interesting over the next few years where we see quite regularly athletes at younger ages, in their mid-20s and so forth, who are dabbling between all different distances rather than waiting into their 30s when they feel that they're losing some of that edge or that speed to try and finally commit to the long distance. It seems that the buffet table is full and people are wanting to feast on everything.
Yeah, completely.
Now, the one forgotten sport is Xterra. What happened to Xterra? But I can tell you what happened to Xterra. Two Kiwis are dominating.
Oh, the Sam show.
Yeah.
Just cleaned up the US Major Series.
Yep.
They won every race.
So Sam Osborne and Samantha Kingsford, who are partners, they've been almost caught out. I'm pretty sure they left to do some racing, but have been caught out by the quarantine and MIQ situation, so have stayed on in the US. But they won the US National Champs and also have literally been undefeated all season in the US.
Yeah, they've been going really good. And against good competition as well. Josh McDowell.
Yep.
Sam's taken him down every time. Eric Lagerstrom raced the last Xterra Nationals.
Well, he backed up.
Cleaned him up.
He backed up not long. It was, I think, 1 week after 70.3 Worlds, where I think Eric got 7th and then came across to race. He'd already qualified. I'd seen he'd done an Xterra early in the season and said he'd absolutely loved it. And he was third in that particular event. But, Sam Osborne, he put on a clinic.
He did, and it's again in the home of triathlon there at the moment in Utah.
Yeah,
Ogden, Utah, and he did put on a clinic. I think his downhill skills won him the race over Josh in the end.
Yep.
And just sort of harks back to where he's from in Rotorua and the amazing riding he can do there, him and Sam, because her bike split as well. Her skills there again put her above the rest of the girls.
Yeah.
And it just shows the technical element of Xterra, and we know that with Flora, the skills there that she developed cross to cross so well. And my understanding too is Xterra World Champs in Maui is still going ahead.
Yes.
So no Kona, but Xterra World Champs.
I'm at this stage. I have a couple of athletes qualified for that, and by all accounts, they've booked accommodation, and it's still going ahead. And I would hazard a guess that we better watch out because Flora Duffy may do an Xterra if she can between now and then, because it's like her pet project, that Xterra racing that she loves to go back to. And if she's on the start line, you'd be hard-pressed to bet against her.
Very hard-pressed to bet against her. So it seems Kona is the only victim of these overseas, outside of NZ and Australia, races of late.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that was victim to restrictions was the 70.3 Worlds in Taupo that got cancelled, and they were moved, obviously, to St. George and then Finland in 2023, or St. George next year, Finland 2023, but we've got them back in New Zealand in 2024. So that's certainly something that we were all building towards as coaches and athletes before COVID. So it's something truly for us to start to get looking forward to again. It's a few years off, but as I say, triathlon seems to be on the verge of an evolution, and it's getting bigger and more publicity. So I just cannot wait to see what kind of start list we have in 2 or 3 years' time from now in Taupo for an event like that.
That's going to be epic, I think. It'll be really, really good. And I agree. Back in your hometown now, Bev, you have World Champs, which is pretty cool.
Yeah.
And I think, that'll be after the Olympics again.
Yep.
So we'll have all the Olympic athletes probably roll out of that and think, try against that World Champs.
Yep.
It'll be pretty cool. So it'll be even stronger. And we'll just see an evolution of all the athletes currently racing going even better. I mean, you thinking about what Sam Long could be doing in 3 years' time.
Oh, totally. Where's Blumenfeld? Where's Eden? What is Alex Yee done his first half Ironman? What times are they running off the bike? I do remember knew of the course changes that they were going to have for the 70.3 when we were going to have it here a year or so ago. And it'll be a hugely challenging course on the bike. It offers a lot if they stick to that particular course. But, by that stage where 70.3 is racing I wouldn't be surprised if it's one with a 108 or 109 or something like that off the bike.
Yeah, completely. I know a young Taupo boy that'll be wanting to be world champion at home too.
Totally. Well, look, there's plenty to look forward to before the end of the year, before we even talk about 2024. So it's just exciting to know that we haven't lost that particular opportunity to host the 70.3 Worlds.
Yeah, no, really exciting and really cool for New Zealand Triathlon, I guess, to just be thinking forward a few years and have it locked in early.
Yep.
And give everybody the opportunity to get super motivated and prepared.
Yeah,
totally. Pretty cool.
All right, mate. Well, I think that's us for this week. So nothing else to report from my end, and we've obviously got some more racing to happen over the next few weeks. So we'll put a pause on that for the time being, and we'll catch up in a week or so.
Yeah, mate. Catch you then.
All right, Mixter.
All right, Bevmeister.
So a couple more cases of COVID for you to deal with in Auckland.
Just a couple.
But other than that, you'll be on Thursday.
Yeah, exactly. And then, doesn't even matter, does it?
No.
So as the percentage rises, you just care a little less.
Oh, absolutely. So what will be the ABV, the average, what the alcohol content of tonight's selection be? What do you think?
Well,
are we talking 4% or are we going to be over 5%? Or touching on 6%?
No, okay. So if it was me ordering, I almost never order below 7. But because it's Baz ordering, there's a range of 5 to 6. So a little bit. And we'll share them in their little as well. Like they're not the 440, they're the 330. Makes a bit of a difference.
Just trying to take the pain away, eh, Mickey? Just trying to take the pain away.
Exactly.
The price of entry is 7%. Oh, awesome. Okay, well, you enjoy your Thirsty Thursday, and then we'll catch up with you next week.
Laters.